Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It is January 27th at approximately 12:35 p.m. Central Standard Time. Just wanted to get out here for a little while to continue the discussion on betrayal and looking very closely now at the pivotal chapter in the Bible concerning Samson. Looking at Judges chapter 16. In its entirety, because we wanted to make sure that you understood the story, so that when we start making points and some other stories, when we start making the points about betrayal and how that thing works, and how it works, and what it is that we should what we should expect, and how it is that God uses it in order to help shape us and mold us. Well, the first thing that I wanted you to understand about chapter 16 comes from 1 John 2:16 and 17. And from the New King James Version, it's, "For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world is passing away, and the lust of it. But he who does the will of God will abide forever," or abides forever. Okay, so the thing is that in looking at all of this, the very first thing that comes out of chapter 16 in the book of Judges is that Samson, after having gone through and killed a bunch of Philistines with the jawbone of an ass, then goes to Gaza and goes in and sleeps with a harlot. And so the thing is that the Gazites, trying to surround and get Samson, lay in wait for him. And this is the place in the Bible where it says that Samson took the gates of the city at midnight and took the gates of the city and walked off with them. So then it goes from there, and it says that then he went to the valley of Sorek, and he fell in love with a woman. And that woman happened to be Delilah. Now, of course, you know, as relationships go, they built a relationship. And the thing about it was that in this particular case, what you have to understand, and this is the thing about betrayal, is that normally betrayal occurs when there is something that someone loves more than they love you, or something that they care about more than they care about you. The Bible goes on to say that the thing about it is that what the Bible goes on to say is that the lords of the Philistines come to Delilah and say to her that help us to capture Samson, because they found out about him. And what they did was they offered her 1,100 pieces of silver. Not just a flat 1,100 pieces of silver, but 1,100 pieces of silver each. But the Bible does not enumerate how many of these Philistine lords were actually there. So as the story goes on, what ends up happening is that Delilah begins to play on Samson and say to him that, "Hey, look, tell me what it is that about your strength." And Samson, of course, lies to her because of the fact that, again, and I'll explain that just a little bit. One of the things that happens is that when we begin to drift away from God, we become more important than what it is that we know about God. And yet, because of that, because of our self-centeredness, we believe that we can actually endure and go through anything without him. And so the thing is that so the first time he goes and he tells her that if they got 7 brand new bowstrings, that when they do that, what'll end up happening is that he'll be weak and they'll be able to do something with him. So the Philistines bring her 7 new bowstrings. She ties him up. It says, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you. The Philistines are upon you." Little did he know that she had them waiting in another room for this to occur. That didn't work. So there was another thing where he said, "Well, if there's new rope, then if you tie me with that, then I'll be weak." And so she went on and had the Philistines in the house again and said, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." And they came, and what ended up happening was that he broke the rope. So finally, because of the amount of self-confidence that Samson had, because of his strength, because again, you need to be mindful of the fact that one of the things that has happened is that in this thing, when God blesses you with something, you must always remember who the creator is and who it is that gave you what it is that you have. So the thing is that what happens with Samson then is that Delilah plays on him and says, well, you've lied to me these times, blah, 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 blah. And so Samson finally, because of his love for her, decides that he is going to tell her the truth. And when he does tell her the truth, she lulls him to sleep. He falls asleep with his head in her lap. And she calls one of the Philistines in. They cut off the 7 locks of his hair. And then she says, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. And of course, because of the fact that his hair had been cut, he no longer possessed his strength. And the Bible says that when he awoke, that he did not know that the Lord had departed from him. When God gives you something, in order for you to be what it is that God would have you to be, when you misuse it, when you abuse it, when you neglect it, what ends up happening is that you end up putting yourself in a position where you are no longer amongst those that is favored by God. God uses these things in order to help us to grow, in order to help us to get to where it is that he would have us to go. But more importantly, he has us go through these things so that we could get to and understand his will in our lives. So the thing is that now that he's been captured, they gouge his eyes out. The Bible says that they used him to power the mill as they ground the corn and the grain and what have you. And so towards the end of this story, what ends up happening is that the Philistines decide that they're going to have a party. They have this party, and in having this party, what ends up happening is that they decide that they want to make fun of Samson. So they bring him out, not realizing and probably having forgotten, because of the fact that his eyes had been gouged out, that cutting his hair was what it was that kept him from realizing and being within, realizing and utilizing all of his potential in the Lord. So what ends up happening is they bring him and they put him between the two pillars, these two pillars that are holding up this temple to Dagon. So what ends up happening is that Samson understands finally that at the end of his life, that he has made a mistake, and that he took credit, that he had been taking credit for stuff that God had actually allowed him to do, and took credit for the things that for the positions that God had placed him in. But he realizes now that God has placed him in yet another position in order for him to do God's will. And notice that here's the thing. His hair had grown back, and he makes this prayer to God that says, Lord, look, here's the deal. Just this one time, I need you to fill me with this strength that you had given me before. Fill me with your presence so that I can do this one thing. And so Samson took hold of those pillars, shook them, and in that day, what ended up happening was that the temple collapsed, and he killed more people that day, more of the Philistines that day, than at any other time during his judgeship. So again, the thing about it is that when when the enemy or betrayer sees the truth of who you are, then they can utilize that thing. They can utilize that thing because of the fact that they now understand your weaknesses. And when they understand your weaknesses, the betrayer and the enemy will try to exploit them. So I just wanted to leave you with that today, because the thing is that as we're getting closer to this, we're going to talk about a few other characters in the Bible, and then we're going to summarize all of this teaching on betrayal. May God bless and keep you, and have a fantastic